This is the World Organic News for the week ending 22nd of April 2019. John Moore reporting. This week we're doing something different. I was interviewed over on the Permaculture Plus website, and I think it would be a very interesting show for you to hear. It's a little bit longer than the usual rants, but I think you'll find it interesting. It's about the work we're doing here at the Highclere Smallholding, a little bit on the regenerative ag we're putting in place, and I hope you find it interesting. I'll be back at the end of the episode.
Hello listeners, and welcome to episode 8 of Permaculture Plus, where we shine the light on and bring the ethics and principles of permaculture into everyday life. I'm Rich Bowden, your co-host, here in the Central West studios of New South Wales, and this week I talk exclusively to co-host John Moore about the regenerative agricultural methods he's applying on his new farm in Highclere in northwestern Tasmania. Hello John, welcome to the show.
Hello, young Rich, from sunny Highclere, where we appear to be in the depths of an Indian summer. Or do we just call this summer now? It's who's to know?
Indeed.
22 degrees or something, yeah?
22. Scorcher for Tassie.
Balmy.
Now, usually we do this show 2 Australian states away, some 1,200 kilometres apart, through the magic of cast software, but we did recently catch up when Carol, my wife, and I finally got to see your fantastic farm. And we were privileged to stay as guests, thanks to you both, John.
Pleasure.
The Highclere farm is nestled in the stunning high country of the northwest of Tassie, not far from the state's iconic Cradle Mountain. And as we were driving through the region, John, I noticed the land's a great deal greener than it is here in the drought-stricken Central West. But I wonder, are there any other farmers using regen ag or permaculture techniques?
Well, there's some suburban types doing the local permaculture stuff, and I'm not sure if they're a cult or what you'd call them, but they're into the permaculture stuff in Penguin. Mm-hmm. But that's they've taken over an old boarding school or something. I'm not real sure of the story, so I won't give their name, but it's a big block in the middle of town, and they're getting ready to permaculture that. There is some what appears to be regenerative work going on with grazing anyway.
Yes.
There was, I don't know if you noticed, you probably wouldn't have because they'd finished by then, but on the way, probably I'd know half a click before our place on the other side of the train line, there was a 10-acre paddock of sweet corn that had been growing. Mm-hmm. I might not just corn anyway. And I thought, gee, that's gone in late unless they're going to feed it off. And about 2 weeks ago, they put, 60 Herefords in there.
Yeah.
Cows and calves. And within 3 days, it had been completely eaten and trampled, and then they were moved on.
Yes.
And I noticed whoever's got these Herefords seems to move them in a big mob into tiny paddocks and move them on fairly quickly. So someone's got the idea right anyway. Whether it's full regen stuff or he's just doing high-pressure rotational grazing, the effects will still be there. But I don't know if there's anyone who's technically putting regen ag on their CV.
No, here in Central Western New South Wales, there are big pushes, John. We've got the big drought on to get farms up and running and prepared before droughts happen. We did notice that it was green around your area, so I suppose there's less of a need for that. But do you see any move towards that area?
Not round here. I mean, people sort of do what Grandad did. But even then, that's not quite true. There's been a big change over the last couple of generations in Australian farming, from taming the land to tolerating the land to working with it.
Yes.
And the more droughts you get there on the mainland, the more the push is going to be to get, because there's enough people doing regenerative ag up there now that when a drought hits, people can see the difference. You just got to look down the fence line and it's green on one side and not on the other.
Yeah, and it looks to be the future, doesn't it?
Yeah, there was a fella up in Armidale, I saw it on Countrywide or Landline, I can't remember which, years ago, and he divided his sheep grazing place, he was superfine merino grower, into 120 paddocks, and he was moving his sheep every 2 or 3 days. And people were saying, have you had rain? He said, yeah, we had it 9 months ago. But the feed was still there and it was still healthy because the stuff had had time to recover from being heavily grazed And because it had been heavily grazed, it recovered quickly, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, the more droughts we get, then we seem to be getting more of them and they're longer.
Mm-hmm. It does seem to be a Mollison-type principle of common sense, though, doesn't it?
It does. It's, and it's not just that, it's backed by the science.
Mm-hmm.
I think you listened to that thing with Charles Massey last week on big ideas.
I haven't yet, John.
Yeah, okay. He was talking about drawdown and how 8 of the top 10 ideas on drawdown you could just relabel regenerative ag.
Yes.
So silver pasture and all that sort of stuff. There's a little bit of that going on down the road here. There's looks like a chestnut grove that they run their Holstein Friesian steers in.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's little bits here and there. It's growing.
Is that silver pasture?
Yeah. Yeah. You could call it that, but it's also just another variation on permaculture or regenerative ag.
Of course.
And as Charles Massey says in that interview, sustainable is no longer good enough. We've got to be regenerative.
Yes. Excellent quote, that.
Yeah.
And, John, we usually wrap each episode of Permaculture Plus around a permaculture ethic or principle. And today I'd like to ask you what the principle of obtaining a yield means to you as a farmer and how you plan to use this principle as your regen farm develops.
Well, basically it comes down to nurturing the soil, Rich. I'm new to this area, so I'm not sure of the carrying capacity or the productive capacity of the soil. Mm-hmm. It does appear to be quite substantial.
Yeah.
But we're moving slowly. So to start with, we slashed around the house and mowed and got that safe, kept the snakes away from the house. Mm-hmm. Harvested the raspberries because it was the next spot out. Got the chooks in under the orchard to get a bit of life into the soil there. And we had the geese just outside the home paddock or home yard. And now we've got the pigs. And we're just working our way slowly through the block, moving further and further away from the house. Mm-hmm. And as we do that, the soil, it's a lovely red volcanic soil. I think you might have noticed how you got about 2 inches taller walking across the paddock yourself.
Yeah, and it was spongy too. I noticed.
Yeah, it's alive. And because I don't know how long it had been rested before we got here, but it's had at least a whole summer without any stock on it. Mm-hmm. The only problem with that is that there's some blackberry regrowth, but the pigs I've noticed in a little paddock they're digging out the blackberry roots because I seem to be attracted to those as a feed. So, yeah. So the idea of getting a yield is to hasten slowly to see what the land will hold.
Yep. And
we'll talk about what the next plans are a little bit later.
Yep.
But there's sort of 7 or 8 different ideas. There's edible flowers, the pigs, milk, cheese, all that sort of stuff. Fukuoka grain, a few other things I'm working on. But the trick is to obtain a yield, more than one yield, like lots of different yields, so that if something does go wrong one year, you're okay, you're not going to starve. Mm-hmm. But equally, it doesn't then stress the land by just taking the nutrients that are needed to grow corn over the whole place, or even apples over the whole place without putting stock under it. It's hasten slowly, I think, is the best way to describe how I'm learning how to make a yield from it.
And speaking of Fukuoka, I know one of your favourites, John, and when I was there, you were telling me how you were going to use Fukuoka seedball methods to grow vegetables. I wonder if you could just go into that a little bit more for us, please.
Okay, so basically you take soil, dry soil, but here we're lucky because the sort of soil we've got goes quite powdery when it's dried and pulverised. Mm-hmm. And you mix that with the seeds, and in a tray, or the ideal way to do it's in an old cement mixer. Then you just keep adding little bits of moisture until balls form, basically. Yep. Little pellets of soil. There's not enough water for the seeds to germinate, but there's enough to hold the soil to the seed. Okay. And then these get broadcast over the field. And it stops the birds eating them because they're already covered in dirt. So you don't have to plough because they're already covered in dirt. Mm-hmm. Things like white clover seed, I might just broadcast naked and see how that goes and then toss this other stuff over the top.
Okay.
But we're looking to do this with radish seeds, a few other things, wheat, barley, rye corn, if I can get hold of the seed.
Mm-hmm.
But as I said, we're in the middle of reassessing. I think when you were here, I was talking about 8 or 9 paddocks, fields. But we've radically increased that number with some calculations and like a moment of Sartori when I went, that's how we'll do it.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. there. Yeah.
With the radish, do you mean the daikon radish?
Yeah, daikon radish, any sorts of radish really, because the little ones break up the surface and then the daikons dig down deep into it. Okay. And it's good feed for stock. And then if you just graze off the top and the radishes die off, you've got all these holes into the ground where water and air and things can get in. And they seed off as well, so they're there for next year, and they add another variation to the pasture mix.
Okay, and John, a quick word about the Polish and hybrid chooks. They were fascinating.
The Polish, why did we choose the Polish? Because those were the ones that turned up on Gumtree when we were looking for hens, and Annie loved them. They look like they've got 1960s beehive hairdos.
Yes, they have.
Yeah. Then they're a bit flighty. I've had to restrain them into a chicken tractor. Because when I had them, was keeping them in them at night and letting them out. During the day, they took off and destroyed a couple of garden beds. Okay. So their high propensity to scratch about is being utilised in the chicken tractor. And I've been dragging them along every 2 days in a part of the paddock just past the house and laying down cardboard and then straw and compost and whatnot on top of the cardboard and giving it a good water. And so they're basically creating the garden beds as they go. Every 2 days there's another section to lay. And today I watered and threw in some cress, so that we've got broad beans and cress now. I've got some broccoli to put in when I move them on Monday. So, they work that way. The hybrids, they were a bit of a risk because they were 5 week olds and 5 week old and unsexed. Mm-hmm. So, you could work on a 50-50 ratio. And there was 10 of them. So I thought, that'd be all right, 5 and 5. 3 of them didn't make it. Some birds just die sometimes. It's never pleasant. But so we ended up with 7. And of those 7, we got a grand total of 1 hen. So the other 6 are roosters. Yeah. And when I tried to mix the Polish in with them, there was a lot of fighting and even bloodletting at one stage. So I had to separate them again that night. But we'll tableise 3 of the roosters, I think is the nicest way of putting it. So, that'll be this week. We'll do that. And then I'm still working on a larger chicken tractor, and we'll put a couple of roosters and most of the hens in one and a trio in the smaller one, and keep going with the garden bed manufacture.
Just a quick word about how they fit into the grand design, John.
Well, putting them on pasture means I don't have to feed them as much. Mm-hmm. They're doing the work for me, so there's no digging involved. As they scratch around, they're leaving a mulch on top of the soil, so they're actually building the garden beds for me. And then I add the cardboard and the other stuff over the top, so the soil's aerated and manured. And it's a matter of you getting the stock to do the work for me rather than spending money on fossil fuels or even electricity to do the work. And by having them out in the system, and the more complex the system is, the more stable it is in a bizarre kind of way. They just add another layer. So I had to put up an electric fence to keep just one wire to keep the geese away from the chooks. Because as the garden beds go in, the geese would have gone in and eaten those. So it's a matter of just confining and rotating, and the geese are doing a similar sort of thing, except they're like the pioneer poultry. They go into the long grasses and things and just crush everything down and eat it and poop everywhere. Yep. Which enlivens it. And so I'll follow, once we get on further, they'll become part of the rotation in front of the pigs, I think. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. Thank you, John. All right. Speaking of John's brilliantly named piglets, we'll be back after the break to hear more from them. Interested in permaculture? Or to be more precise, are you interested in how permaculture can improve aspects of your everyday life? co-hosts Rich Bowden and John Moore invite you to listen to Permaculture Plus to find this out for yourselves. And a hint, it's more than just growing things. That's Permaculture Plus in your podcaster feed of choice on the 15th of every month.
Hi, I'm John Moore, producer of the World Organic News podcast. I report on stories and ideas that fit with the show's catchphrase: decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. So I cover everything from alternative energy to regenerative agriculture. A new episode releases each Monday morning, and the show is approaching the end of its third year. So please, join me and together we can change the world.
And those last sounds you heard were the irascible Jake and Elwood, the showpiece at the moment of the Highclere farm. John, a bit of background please on the Piggy Blues Brothers and how they fit into your produce no waste ethos.
Pigs, eh? Well, I'm a first-time pig keeper, long-time fan. We wandered off and picked them up a couple of 4 weeks ago. And while we were there, on our way there, young Annie came up with the idea of Jake and Elwood, which I thought, yeah, perfect.
Perfect indeed.
So how they fit in is the place has been under cattle, I think, possibly some sheep for at least 5 or 10 years, and the pastures need renovating. And there's also been a lot of slashing going on, so the way that blackberry was dealt with was to either hit it with Roundup or to bale it into hay, which kills it off. But with the pigs, we'll actually, as I said earlier, that they love the blackberry roots. So we'll actually get to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah.
Now, I still have ethical qualms about having bare soil, but we'll come to that in a little bit, about how I'm going to overcome that. But it won't be bare for long, and the soil will be rejuvenated with all the manure and the digging. And as soon as they've finished clearing the space, we'll move them on and get cover crop in as quickly as possible.
Okay.
Probably field peas or something like that at this time of year. Mm-hmm. And then as that grows out, we can then oversow with barley or wheat or sorghum or something for summer in the Fukuoka way, and then harvest the peas when the grain's sort of 3 or 4 inches up, and then I'll run the geese across that, take the top off and make them tiller, and by then the pigs will be halfway through their next paddock. So they're manuring, they're clearing the blackberry roots, they're removing all the old dead pasture it really needs to be resown, and they're renovating as they go. And at the same time producing, creating bacon without me having to spend anything. I know we spend a little bit on feed just to keep them tamish so that they'll come to the bucket and whatnot. But we're not overfeeding. I think you were there. You came to pig feeding. Yes. There was a couple of handfuls in the bottom of the bucket of wheat, and they just sat there and crunched through it for 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. They went back off to toss around in the paddock.
I think it was then, John, that you sort of gave me a little bit of a tour of where Jake and Nell would run, and it was very noticeable after you pointed it out to me that how they're built to make a difference to the landscape, and there were the holes, literally holes in the ground where they dug through to get to the...
from the shape of their noses.
Yes, it was quite remarkable, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then those things sort of join up as they follow through and eat all the roots, and then they turn over the top pasture, the stuff that's growing on top, and they either trample that in or they eat it or it just dies away. So it becomes part of the organic matter in the soil. So, yeah, they're doing a good job. As I say, first-time pig owner or pig keeper. Annie's sons had them for a little while. I used to go down and see his pigs, but they were full sows. We started with piglets, start small. And they learnt in the first sort of 20 minutes here that the electric fence actually works because they've got big floppy ears, and it gave them a bit of a jolt, and they've kept away from it ever since, which is nice. Even when they've turned over soil onto the bottom wire and basically shorted the whole thing out. They still wouldn't go anywhere near the wires. So going around once every couple of days to make sure the wire's still clear is part of the routine. I didn't realise I'd have to be doing, but that's all right, you know.
And I know I understand you're now planning for dairy sheep, John, is that right?
Well, we are, yeah. Like I said, we went out with the metal tape measure the other day. And so the piglets, I thought, were on about 500 square metres, because that's what I'd paced out, 30-inch paces and all the rest of it. Turns out that they're on 620 square metres, because it wasn't 20 by 25, it was 18 by 34. But, you know,
close.
They seem to be having fun, which I think I mentioned to you at the time we probably could have done with another 2 of them for the space they're in.
Is that still on the plans?
No, possibly, but we'll see how we go, because it's about hastening slowly and learning what the soil can and can't take. So when we did the measurements, and remembering that fella up in New England with his 20 paddocks, or 120, I can't remember, lots of paddocks. I did the calculations, and we could actually have 20 paddocks, like fields, garden beds almost, of 220-odd square metres, 10 along the top fence, 10 along the bottom fence, with a little alleyway through the middle. And then as we move through the cycle, if they're only in there for a week, it takes them that long to clear the paddock. They're back in that same paddock in 4 months. So there's been time for the parasite cycles to be broken. That's plenty of time to grow feed in there for them, so that there's something for them when they get back. Now, should the land be strong enough so that it takes them 2 weeks to clear because it's growing so much, that'll be 8 months before they're back. So we've got more than enough time to do stuff. It just depends. So working on 1 week at a time and calculating out, and from what my experience with keeping sheep for 20-odd years, so I thought we'd probably run 4 or 5 ewes, which is a little bit expensive to be running a ram with, but you would anyway, just for the sake of convenience. And so I started looking around for rare breeds, because if we're going to have some, I want something a little bit different. And the Shropshires I had in the past were really docile. And so that sort of thing was what I was looking at. I came across East Friesland sheep, which are a dairy sheep, which give between sort of 1.5 to 3 litres each a day, depending on the breed and the feed and all the rest of it. They're a little bit prone to illness here in Australia. Easily suffer skin cancers because they've got pink skin, and so they can get carcinomas on their ears and things. But there's a lady down on the other side of Hobart who runs a flock of 110, but she also crossed some Awasi and some other stuff into them. And now the Awasi is a Middle East sheep breed. Yeah, and it was tightly held by a mob on the mainland, but one of the flocks came up and she snaffled it. So I'm gonna send an email when I've looked at exactly what it is we need and what we need to do. But she has stuff stock for sale all year. So maybe some old girls that are past their prime for commercial dairying, but like to be pampered and looked after here, would be a good way to start, particularly if they are in lamb, so then we wouldn't have to have a ram for a little while. And with the 20 paddocks, we could rotate them through that and have sheds and whatnot for them that they can come and sleep in at night, because they've still got a lot of East Friesland in them, which means they do need to be pampered. And that's fine, because that's, stay small and look after what you got. So they'd go through probably 3 paddocks ahead of the pigs, and 1 paddock ahead of the pigs, probably 2 actually, would be the geese, so that there's a blank paddock between the geese and the pigs. And they just follow each other around the 20 paddocks, 1 or 2 weeks at a time, depending on how they're going and how much is left for them to eat and all the rest of it, and make adjustments for what's actually happening on the ground. And if we do hit a drought, then we just cull down to the minimum, so that'd probably mean knocking the pigs on the head if we'd already finished rotating through the whole place once, and just maintain the sheep and hand feed where we had to. But the way it's going and the way it's setting itself up, or we're setting it up, is that there will always be plenty of feed, even if it's dry matter. it'll still have good nutritional value and deep, well-rooted stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. I think even 4 or 5 years may well be an underestimate of what we can keep, but I'd rather, again, underestimate and not overgraze. So too many people with small holdings tend to overgraze. Well, not so much overgraze as they overpopulate with stock, and then they have to hand feed through winter or summer on the mainland because it's too dry and nothing's growing. I like to have pasture up my sleeve, and even though we've only got the 1.5 acres here, a bit over, handled well and kept small, and small rotational fields, you can get an awful lot out of it, and it is highly productive soil. It is just, I've never had soil like this before. It's a bit of a treat.
John, yeah. Thanks for your farming insights today, John. They are really interesting, and I look forward to popping back down very soon. Carol and I are making plans already, although maybe...
I'll bring in Carol as well. Hooray!
Maybe not across the Tasmanian ship now, though. I might try another way.
She can fly down and you'll meet her at the airport. Okay. Yeah.
But a final question, John. Permaculture and regen methods. What would you suggest for farmers just starting out in the industry? In other words, what would work best for them to start?
Well, I'd read everything I can get my hands on. That's probably a good start. There's a lot of the old books. There's those ones I remember showing you on backyard pig farming and backyard sheep farming and things like that. Start small, read, listen, and really listen to your soil. And I know that sounds a bit odd, but it will talk to you. It'll tell you. And again, hasten slowly and do not overgraze. Move things on if the feed's gone. And hold your nerve when all the locals around you are slashing and running tractors and, just hold your nerve.
What do you mean by that, John?
Okay, so this was something I came across in one of the first permaculture books I read. Early summer here, rather, people were harvesting hay and silage and slashing and all the rest, and basically the paddocks died under them. And I didn't. I left stuff as it is, and it stayed okay, and the organic matter that was there dropped down, and as I said, we've had it destocked at least since summer, probably a bit earlier, because there was nothing here in October when we first looked. So that there's a chance for the organic matter to get back into the soil. And it's easy to fall into everyone else is. And it's easy to fall into, oh goodness, everyone else is doing this, so I better do it too. There was a webinar I was listening to. This bloke, a regen bloke, was talking about, he had a photo of someone ploughing. And he said, I don't know why he's doing that. It might be recreational ploughing. Recreational tillage, he's called it. Sometimes it's a good way to get away from the missus. Wow. Let's go and destroy 50 acres of soil, but at least I've got a quiet life. I mean, people don't see it like that. There is... I've seen a moldboard plough at work last year, and it is a thing of beauty. I mean, it does a lot of damage, but it is a thing of beauty to watch. So, so move slowly, think carefully, and start with small animals. If pigs aren't your thing, start with sheep. I mean, we all have this strange obsession with goats when we start, but make sure your fencing's right before you get a goat. And even just start with poultry. There's nothing nicer than nothing more calming than sitting in the shed with the chooks as they go about their business.
Wholesome sound, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just calming. It's just
Totally agree there, John.
Although the buggers all ran up one of the apple trees the other day, I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen it
up an apple tree.
Up and one of the low trunks they jumped on and chased up. I thought, what the? I suspect Chester the Wonder Cat may have had something to do with it, but he wasn't about that I could see, but that doesn't mean he didn't cause it. Yeah, so move slowly, think about what you're doing, and read. Okay. And contemplate what you're reading.
Thank you very much, John. And that is it for episode 8. A really interesting episode, I think you'll agree. Thanks for joining us. We'll have close updates on John and Andy's Highclere farm in the near future. And you can find all the details over at John's Highclere blog and coming podcast in the show notes. Possibly, says John. So bye for now.
Bye. And there you have it, the interview between Rich Bowden and myself on the gentle art of introducing regenerative agriculture to a small holding. Hope you found it interesting. If you did, there's a link in the show notes to my website to do with this place, and you can email me through that if you needed to. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week.